I don't think Batman's that good.
Hot shit! Cold shit! Okay, motherfucker, let's do this!
Look, I wanted to like this show. Everyone gushes over it. It's one of the best animated shows ever made. It's cool. It's got good villains. It cured my ED. I've heard it all. But when I went to pop in my friend John's DVDs, all I could muster as a reaction was a resounding But I don't just want to completely bitch and moan and shit on people for however long this video takes. I want to express what I think the show actually is beyond what people have said it is.
It'd be tough to find a piece of DC Comics media after 1992 that hasn't been majorly influenced by Batman the Animated Series.
It's one of the most influential
and has strongly influenced pop culture.
One of the most influential,
the purest distillation,
the definitive, most well-rounded,
purest, most definitive,
more mature in tone, with a darker atmosphere.
He's tortured, but mature.
It was really like intensely dark.
Batman takes on themes that are of no concern to children.
Emmy Award-winning material that would entertain children but also adults.
Made for both kids and adults.
Very well received by adults.
And more sophisticated writing.
Subtle writing.
Success stems from the moralistic implications.
A serious exploration of the human element, motivations, and inner conflicts behind these characters.
Batman's opponents may come from beyond the best known of his rogues gallery, with motives beyond two-dimensional villainy, and the consistent depth in each new episode built grand, meaningful half-hour arcs that still resonate. And, of course, the article that pushed me over the edge. It may have been a superhero show, but it was rarely larger than life, and it is that adherence to the human-sized drama that has allowed it to age so well. It proved that kids' cartoons could take themselves seriously, play for keeps, and exist as real character dramas. The world, or even the city, was rarely at stake, merely the lives of a few innocent Gothamites or the reputation of those who would attempt to protect the city. The various heroes and villains were normal people with normal problems. Its stories revolved not around alien invasions or doomsday scenarios, but around the stuff that real life is made of.
Fucking patent law? Jesus Christ.
People really see this show as this deep, mature adult work of fiction, and I just don't get it. I feel like I watched a different show than them. Now, before I continue, I want to make some caveats. First, I think it's important to note the things I like about the show, because there is merit here. The art style, the dark deco, is a good-ass look, and some of these episodes use shadows super well. It's feature film level. There's also what Captain Christian and Rob Zacny at Whedon said about the show. Batman the Animated Series didn't just understand Batman, it understood how people related to different versions of the character, and what they needed from these stories. The 85 episodes of Batman run a gamut of tones and genre trappings, so it's able to please basically anyone, even an episode that many despise.
The less said about episodes like I've Got Batman in My Basement, the better.
Will appeal to somebody.
You guys remember, I think it's Batman in My Basement? That was one of the ones that felt very Saturday morning cartoonish, but at the same time, like there's that just weirdly like terrifying responsibility of like, oh, this guy might die. This is like a person's life on your hands. And I don't know, he like teams up with his bully or something. Yeah. That show had like a ton of heart. So
even I, the resident Batman the Animated Series hate demagogue, got episodes I enjoy and would return to if given the chance. The other caveat I want to make is that context with a show that's over 25 years old is important to how people, including me, engage with it and perceive it. When it aired, there wasn't a way to watch big chunks of episodes like I was able to. You experienced the hype of waiting for one new episode every week or even every day at one point. Here's 20 minutes of TV, now move on. Fatigue couldn't set in because you couldn't watch that much. On top of that, Batman looks like The Sopranos compared to what had come before it. Before 1993, animation in the West was, at best, friendly children's programming, and at worst, toilet water. It's technically drinkable, but you probably shouldn't for your health. There's a reason some articles and videos and even the creators themselves cite like G.I. Joe and Transformers and He-Man and shit as the lesser ancestors of Batman, because it's alarmingly true. Have y'all watched He-Man as an adult human? It's aged, to put it lightly. It's the definition of limited animation, with reused cuts, lots of close-ups and strategic framing, and shit like this. I do think the art style has a campy charm to it, and truly I'm blessed with the merman's design as a person perpetually in a state of exasperated surprise. But that style is held back by the animation, where characters don't feel integrated into the world. You can almost see the cells on top of the backgrounds. As for the story, it's pretty standard Saturday morning fare. Bad guy wants to harm the good guys for the sake of it. Good guys win by just tossing folks. The end of the episode also has a shoehorned moral to justify the existence of its gratuitous goofiness. This episode's is, don't take shortcuts, do things the right way, as if Skeletor's main flaw is that he shouldn't have used some magic diamond to take over the kingdom, but rather his bare fleshless hands to seize power from this unjust hereditary monarchy. Anyway, Batman clearly has an up in terms of style and maturity on He-Man and other cartoons of the time. Now granted, that's the earlier 80s, things got better nearer to Batman's birth. Something like, Captain Planet? I mean, it doesn't look like total ass, it's not horrible per se. The art style is derivative, but the animation and narrative pacing is marginally better than its predecessors. The reason I want to talk Captain Planet is because of how explicit it got. As a function of being PSA the TV show, it touched on real-life issues they thought its demographic should be aware of to help turn pollution to zero and make the world a better place. So one episode was on drug addiction, or mind pollution, because it needs to fit the theme. Wind Girl's cousin gets hooked on a drug called Bliss from this poop rat, and the episode goes pretty dark with it. You see him fiending for more, going through withdrawals, and ultimately becoming part of a mindless army of addicts that attack the Planeteers. And at the climax, I shit you not, this dude nearly bleeds out, they show blood pouring from his wrists, and he winds up ODing. They kill a child in Captain Planet. Batman couldn't even show the deaths of 2 adults, let alone a kid who essentially killed himself with drugs. Now, Batman doesn't require a ham-fisted message to puncture your eye and ear holes to tell a story, which is what makes it more palatable to a general audience, or really any audience, than Captain Planet. This isn't to say Batman didn't have morals to its tales, it just wasn't so telegraphed and the drama could stand on its own. Now, on the other side of the childhood scarability spectrum was what Disney produced in the latter half of the 80s and early 90s. They've got a focus on character animation that those early 80s shows just couldn't contend with. Of course, these shows weren't too deep themselves. Do I know this for certain? No, I did not sit my ass down and watch the entirety of Disney's 80s syndicated canon to make one minor point in this video. From what I know, the ones comparable to Batman were fun, adventurous romps with a pulpiness that fans of Batman could appreciate, but appealed directly to kids with their stories and sense of humor. This is all to say Batman the Animated Series was unique at the time. It truly was a darker cartoon, literally and tonally. It went out of its way to explicitly motivate its villains and create more tense action with a quality of animation that really only Disney could afford to produce at the time. To someone with nostalgia for that era directly, I could see why Batman means so much to them and why they'd consider it great. Without that nostalgia though, I think I could see the show with eyes unclouded, and the stuff people say, I don't get it. Like, come on, the show doesn't always look great. You can't animate and draw 27 hours worth of show and expect it all to be good, but even still, I think the majority of the show just looks okay with only a few standouts. For 1 or 2 bits of genuinely sweet Sakuga, you get like 10 lousy, impactless fights, flat lighting, and some animation that is just cringeworthy. Why does nobody talk about Moon of the Wolf? Episode's completely fucked. Like, the composition is bad, the perspective on things is messed up. Like, look at this house collapse. See how far it is from the edge? Okay, and then they cut here, and the planks are falling off the cliff. Good lord. It's the worst episode of the series, bar none. Not just for the animation, but that ain't doing it any favors. Again, Batman was overall better than its predecessors. It was way more fluid, but it wasn't always a looker. Moving on, that Forbes article and Captain Christian both comment on how grounded the show is, but nah. Its stories revolved not around alien invasions or doomsday scenarios, but around stuff that real life is made of. Like, all of this. Oh, yep, that's real life, alright? Just people being people, just guys being dudes.
What's better than this? Guys being dudes.
You know, there isn't anything wrong with admitting the show isn't realistic. pulp and science fiction are both genres worthy of praise too. See, But I guess that wouldn't contrive the gravity of the show that they want to sell. Is this a case of applying the realism and grit of modern filmic incarnations to their memories of this show? Who's to say? I'm not saying it. Are you saying it? I don't know. I can't hear you. I'm really low. Beyond all that, though, what gets me is the assertion that Batman is deep. But to talk about that, we should probably talk about what deep is. So what is deep? Like with porn, deep feels like something you know when you see it. It's highly subjective and malleable. It's not even just based on the merits of the piece of media that you're watching, but on the context with which that media you're watching finds itself in. Like, the depth of the things that you've experienced before inform the depth of what you're watching now. What comes to mind is this image of digging. You dig a hole every time you experience a piece of media. The lowest you've dug is the deepest something has been to you, which makes anything at that level or higher feel less novel or interesting. We are always looking to take it a step further, so anything that doesn't do that won't feel nearly as mind-blowing or special. What is depth? What's digging a metaphor of? I'd say it's ideas that get explored and interrogated in a way that I hadn't seen before or thought of myself. So you see The Matrix for the first time, and your mind gets absolutely blown because you're only 10 and you now have to consider the epistemic conundrum that you cannot know if the world around you is real. That hole has been dug for you at some depth. But then later you read Descartes, and he's like, what if the devil is deceiving us into thinking the world is different than it is? Since you've seen The Matrix though, you're like, fuck this guy, cribbing from the Wachowski sisters, how rude. It doesn't matter which came first historically, whichever came first to dig this hole of epistemic doubt to existence is going to make the subsequent exposures to the idea feel less deep. This example is very reductive, but hopefully it conveys what I mean. However, things can be as deep as you want to make them, as deep as you are willing to dig. Sometimes you just got to put more work into it. That's why we watch videos about Shrek. You get to listen to people who've done the work on something that you would have deemed unworthy of the effort yourself. You see a person ask questions like, what's a cool lens to put on this to suss out some new interesting meaning that we didn't think about before, you know? Without doing that work though, I don't think Batman the Animated Series ever gets that deep relative to other media I've consumed. The main reason? Batman is episodic. Yes, there is some continuity between episodes, and the universe doesn't constantly reset itself to some prior state. However, characters' arcs and the ideas presented don't get a chance to grow or evolve. What you see is what you get. Two-Face, an iconic villain of the show, goes from a man fighting against repressed anger, which takes over and enacts its own brand of violent vigilante justice, to a caricature of himself.
It's too brown. I prefer green, as in money.
His origin is interesting, dark, with some shade of gray to him, but once that's done, he's reduced to a villain of the week. Every episode is discrete, meaning any idea or arc only gets the bare minimum of focus in favor of what the showrunners found important, the action. As Alan Burnett said in an oral history of the show, we had these 3 rules: no aliens, no ghosts, and no humanitas awards. No pro-social stories. We were just out to have a good time and to give the audience some fun thrills, some real Batman thrills. I don't think the showrunner's sole focus was on action, but any ideas presented in an episode were more in service of a mysterious and suspenseful plot whose tension concludes with action rather than in actually saying much of substance. I'm gonna go through an episode just to illustrate what I mean, why I don't think the show is that deep. Let's look at one from halfway through production, the Riddler's introduction titled, "If You're So Smart, Why Aren't You Rich?" Now already that title is making my leftist gland tingle. Is this going to critique capitalism? Well, yes, but not much. Ed Nigma is a game designer working under Daniel Mockridge for the company Competitron, and he gets fired for suing the company for royalties to his games. This is the Riddler's origin, and he kidnaps Mockridge first just to take the guy out, but when Batman gets involved, uses him as bait to spring traps on Bruce. Throughout the episode, Riddler makes good on his namesake by making riddles for Batman to solve in order to reveal his location. The final encounter is in a labyrinth housing its own mechanical minotaur, griffins, and flying hand of fate, where Batman and Robin puzzle their way through to save Mockridge. Riddler flies out of Gotham, and the episode ends with Mockridge paranoid that Nigma could steal him away at any time. So the episode is lightly about greed bad. Mockridge's character is the archetypal selfish businessman. After firing his most successful designer for daring to expect royalties for his work, he describes his company like this.
Competitron is the corporate attitude. Its strength is in the boardroom, the deal, the contract. Specifically, the work-for-hire contract you signed.
Unlike Bruce, who wants to buy out the company to bring jobs to Gotham, Mockridge is looking for a fat payout to laugh all the way to the bank with. Now, the show doesn't condone Riddler seeking violent revenge, but Bruce's final remarks... But Bruce's final remarks when Mockridge is cowering in his bedroom communicate that Mockridge got some just desserts.
How much is a good night's sleep worth? Now there's a riddle for you.
Mockridge was too greedy for his own good, but the Riddler can't be killing folks. And that's basically all the episode says. Around 8 minutes, or 40% of the total episode, are spent in action scenes without any thematic exploration. Just fights and riddles. Side note, this is one of the good-looking episodes. The facial animation especially stands out. Really, the most thematically dense part of the episode is the exposition, the first 3 minutes. After that, it goes into cruise control with a kidnapping, some fights, and figuring out how to get to the villain before it's too late. It ain't that deep. Was it enjoyable to watch? Sure. Did I get anything out of it? Not really. We don't even get much development of Riddler. His sole motivation is to get back at Mockridge. Why riddles? 'Cause that was his job. It makes sense. He just develops a bloodlust really quick and finds the resources to build advanced combat robots in a massive maze because that would be cool. Let's look at another example. Beware of the Grey Ghost. Plot. Batman's got to deal with a bomber who is emulating the attacks done by a character in an old detective serial called The Grey Ghost. Just so happens the show was an influence on Bruce, so he goes to find the episode which will give him all the clues, but it ain't at the archive. He tracks down the ghost himself, Simon Trent, to see if he would have any idea where the reels are. Trent's got them because he's a washed-up actor who is haunted and consumed by his past, but he's reluctant to help Batman because he isn't really the Grey Ghost. Batman uses guilt, and it's super effective, getting Trent to don the costume again and help Batman save the day from this annoying twerp whose sole motivation is using toys to steal money. First things first, whoa, meta, they got the old Batman actor to play the guy that influences this Batman, holy shit. The episode is a pass the torch moment, getting the blessing from the guy who most Batman media of the period were trying to leave behind. Other than that, the episode is pretty meatless thematically. Trent wants to reject the role of the Grey Ghost, but Batman gets him to accept it again. Truly, there isn't much else to discuss past that. We don't see how Bruce is influenced by Grey Ghost, what reasons Ghost fought for justice. We just see that Bruce recreates the superficial elements of him, i.e. the vigilante status and the lair. And Trent just goes from hating his life for being stuck to the property to converting the show to VHS and selling it? Damn, man, what a turnaround. He's really moving on. Is the point that Trent shouldn't have felt trapped, but instead embraced the identity he had? But the dude can't get an acting gig. Does he have to give up his dreams? We don't know. It doesn't matter. This was all to show us some nice explosions, get Adam West to cameo, and give Batman a hero to look up to. Also, this is the only episode that the Grey Ghost comes up. It isn't mentioned ever again. Yay, episodic storytelling! I won't belabor the point by talking about any more episodes, at least in this section, but what I want to say is that the show doesn't go that deep, at least on its own. It'll set up a big, high-concept idea just so that they can quickly get to a big fight or a big chase or whatever it is. Example. Man makes highly intelligent AI in his pursuit of automating the future, and they make it an off-brand HAL without saying anything on automation or AI other than the old robots take things too literally chestnut. Then they blow it up. Now, diagnosing the problem isn't difficult when you have the words of the creators to cite. In the Batman the Animated Series Writer's Bible, the document which laid the early groundwork for what the show would become, they wrote, "Each episode will also feature a big set piece, an incredible visual action visual that will be looked forward to element in each show. This will be the climax, centerpiece, or showstopper of each episode. Structurally, we want these 22-minute episodes to function as uniformed, tightly plotted mini-movies. In the search for a satisfying ending, always remember to save something big for the third act. The action must always build to a big finish. They set out to make thrilling, tense action cartoons, and they succeeded. But in order to do that, they had to rush past saying much of anything just to get there. So this might be massively and unethically presumptuous of me to say, but I think I have a reason as to why people say Batman is as deep as they do. That reason? Reification. To help explain, Drew from Select Screen is going to talk about his relationships to Star Wars. And trust me, it will make sense in a bit, just, hear him out. He's a good guy.
So hearing Zach share his thoughts about Batman the Animated Series has got me thinking an awful lot about Star Wars. That's right, fair warning, you're about to hear some random white guy on the internet talk about Star Wars for the next couple of minutes. I guess it really do be like that sometimes, huh? Now, due to the mixed reaction The Rise of Skywalker has received since its release, I've been reflecting more and more on why this latest Disney trilogy just hasn't really done much for me. For context, although I'm sure at this point you probably could have just guessed this, but growing up, I was a huge Star Wars fan. I can still remember how excited I was to get the special edition VHS box set as a present for my 7th birthday, and man, I just wore those things out. Like, this isn't hyperbole here. I would be willing to bet I watched each of those first 3 films around 50 times a piece by the age of, say, 12. I was just watching them constantly. And I mean, that's just the beginning. I can still remember being 8 years old and being just absolutely furious at my mom that she wouldn't let me go to the midnight release of The Phantom Menace with my 2 older brothers. But don't worry, she made up for it in the long run by taking me to see that thing like 5 times before it stopped playing in the theater, which is way more Jar Jar Binks than any human adult should ever be forced to endure. On top of all this, I collected just about every Star Wars Lego set, bought tons of action figures, played just about every Star Wars video game I could get my little hands on. Basically, what I'm trying to say here is, when I was a child, my obsession with Star Wars was damn near all-consuming. But now, decades later, we have an entirely new trilogy of movies, but, truthfully, they don't really elicit much of a reaction out of me one way or the other. They just don't compare to what came before them. But then again, when I really stop to think about it, well, how could they? Like, even though I think these latest movies are certainly more competently made than the prequels were, and there are definitely aspects to them that I do genuinely enjoy, but if you forced me to choose which of these 2 trilogies I had to marathon through right now, well, I've just got to be honest with you and say I'd probably pick the prequels. Because while they definitely are in many ways a cinematic train wreck, they still have at least something that I consider to be kind of fundamental to Star Wars. They still feel big. But the important thing I think I now realize is it wasn't actually the movies themselves that made them feel so grand and boundless. It was actually all the extra stuff around them. It was all the toys, the video games, and the EU novels that took this series that at its core could have been nothing more than just 6 films and turned it into something with, well, its own universe. All this supplementary material is why I know the name of every planet in the prequels, or who every single one of the bounty hunters are from The Empire Strikes Back. I knew who Zam Wessel was because I built her speeder out of Legos. I knew who IG-88 was because I fought him in Shadows of the Empire. All these little things, these minor characters, the ships they piloted, the worlds they came from, they all became imbued with so much more meaning. And so it was because of all this ephemera that Star Wars grew into something so much bigger than anything my young mind had ever encountered before. Ultimately, for me, Star Wars was kind of like this big ball of Play-Doh, and all that extra material ended up getting smushed all together, until eventually the whole thing just becomes what the world of Star Wars was to me. All the holes, the cracks, and the flaws just got paved over as they became a part of the much greater whole that was Star Wars. And so then, by definition, that meant that all of it had to be considered good as well. And so conversely, I think this is also why the Disney trilogy has left me feeling so ambivalent about the franchise these days. Like, for example, by virtue of working at a movie theater, I probably ended up seeing The Rise of Skywalker like 10 times, and yet I still have no idea who the fuck the Knights of Ren are supposed to be. And I'm sure that information does exist out there somewhere, most likely explained in a comic book tie-in or an animated series, but I'm just not plugged into the world of Star Wars like that anymore. This isn't a universe I'm trying to get lost in. I'm not running out to buy the limited edition cereal box or collect every Taco Bell kids meal anymore. And so, although ironically these new films were created by probably the largest cultural monolith we have today, at least for me, they nonetheless still feel like they've just withered in the shadow of what came before them. And you know, at this point, I think I've kind of just accepted that.
So when Drew describes Star Wars as Play-Doh, that's the reification right there. Or rather, the output of creating with that dough is a reified world, a world made real. That's the dictionary definition of reify, but I'm not saying you think that the world is real, you just have this sort of ineffable feel for it. As Drew said about the prequels, they still feel big, they still have a weight to him because of all the work that he did as a kid to build them up to something more than the sum of their parts. And that kid aspect is an important detail. Kids are storytelling machines. That's what play ultimately is, right? And with media like Star Wars, kids fuel their play because they mimic what they've already seen. Then that play helps solidify the reality, the self-imposed verisimilitude and scale of the Star Wars world. It's this unconscious narrative collaboration that kids do with media that happens to strike their fancy. Star Wars has an edge because it's basically a merchandising industrial complex, but kids don't need an expanded universe to get material to build with. Kids' imagination is strong enough on its own to just build what it needs. This is all to say, I posit that the older fans of Batman the Animated Series reified it as kids to make it something more than it is. And I get it, it's got a lot going for it. It's got a great art style, it's got motivated villains, it's got a relatively fleshed out world, it's got toys, it's got comics and movies that you can latch onto. There's a lot for you to work with. So I think when people reference the show now, they're actually referencing a show that they had a part in making, that they fleshed out and made more realistic than it actually was. I don't want to take this relationship away from people. I think it's a beautiful thing. It shows the strength of the human imagination to sort of get immersed in stuff, and, you know, it seems like a nice thing to have. But maybe that bias is affecting the way people talk about this show. Or I could just be reaching and pulling all this shit out of my ass. I admit that. But I just wanted to talk about this concept. I figured I could fit it into a little Batman video. Thanks for watching. Now, just because Batman isn't that deep doesn't mean it isn't saying things. That's just how media do. Authorial intent be damned. And I won't be covering every single episode because I respect both of our times as human beings with very limited, valuable time on this earth. But I'll be covering some major themes and then like one choice episode that I just really wanted to say something on. So let's go. What makes a cop? It's not a badge, a uniform, or a paycheck from a police department. A cop is someone who uses violence to uphold the law. This iteration of Batman performs the actions of a cop, so therefore he is one. He also helps organize stings, is allowed into crime scenes, consistently collaborates with Commissioner Gordon, and the police have dedicated a spotlight to call upon him with. What's interesting is that in the Writer's Bible, they explicitly state that none of this was going to happen. They originally planned to have the police be hostile to Batman, to disapprove of his methods. The first episode with Man-Bat reflects this. The SWAT team is called in to take care of Bruce. However, it's only because of a mix-up with who is stealing pharmaceuticals. Once they figure out it's an anatomical bat and not a costumed one, things are kosher between Bruce and the GCPD. They might as well give him a badge and call it a day. Irregardless, Batman fits the bill of wielding violence to preserve laws. I mean, the dude is just constantly beating the crap out of people. That's his MO, that's why we come to the show. But he also uses the threat of violence and intimidation to get the information that he wants. Of course, in real life as in the show, some laws will be broken in order to uphold others. Human rights are more of a suggestion than a strict rule, more de jure than de facto. He takes advantage of his vigilante status to enact extrajudicial forms of interrogation without having to deal with the rights generally afforded to suspected criminals.
I ain't saying nothing till I see my lawyer.
Suit yourself.
Batman has the luxury of assuming guilt before innocence. When every villain is written to be guilty, there's no need to question Batman's methods. He is justified because he is right. If you've seen Jack Saint's video on the Dirty Harry series, this will sound familiar to you.
The movie consistently finds ways to write around Harry facing the consequences and moral greys that inevitably come with giving vigilante cops free rein to act as judge, jury, and executioner.
But something important to bring up is that, like other incarnations, Batman doesn't kill. Well, okay, there is one episode with Hardak where Bruce throws a robot Bullock into the bat signal, but he didn't know it was a robot, so he willingly pushed a man into a lethal amount of electric shock. Otherwise, he doesn't kill. This fundamental characteristic distinguishes him from the police in and outside of the show. No matter the scenario, he will find a way to non-lethally stop someone, leaving no gray area as to whether a threat necessitated a certain level of violence or if someone didn't deserve to be killed. He is unaccountable for his actions and disregards some rights, but he is a hard line at taking a life. It's almost idyllic in a way. Unlike in Dirty Harry, where he kills with reckless abandon but is written to be justified, Batman is a sort of liberal fantasy of a cop with all of the power in the world who we can be comfortable knowing will never cross the ultimate boundary of where power through violence leads. As we discussed with that Riddler episode before, Batman has some things to say about the rich. Most of it, not so good. I mean, look at this classic depiction of the wealthy, a gluttonous slave driver with a ham bone stuck in his throat.
I have to eat. They have to work.
They really don't pull any punches, making Mockridge look like a decent guy you wouldn't want a mechanical minotaur to decapitate. These are a cast of greedy, arrogant people who put money above all else, even other human lives. Roland Daggett first uses a toxic facial cream to force Matt Hagen, aka Clayface, into a drug-like dependency to do criminal stuff for him. Then he wants to demolish a section of Gotham with people still in it in order to build a mini-mall. As he says at the Better Business Council,
"We cannot allow the underclass to hinder us from building a better tomorrow."
Lastly, he creates a disease to spread through animals to people in the hopes of profiting from the cure he made for it. Truly an all-around despicable guy. Grant Walker, a Disney Andrew Ryan hybrid, has a similar outlook on the world. He wants to freeze the planet above water and continue civilization in a city of the deep. He's basically an uber-fascist, save for any ideology that we can see. There's also Ferris Boyle, who doesn't want to spend his own money to help Mr. Freeze's wife. This guy Warren, who believes he and Bruce are
a superior animal
to those in the lower class. And the group of millionaires in the episode Prophecy of Doom, who pool their money together to keep themselves wealthy in a prophesized post-apocalypse. With a few exceptions, the upper class are out for themselves in this series. This causes them to come under fire, specifically from some of Batman's most iconic villains. Riddler, Freeze, Clayface, Poison Ivy, they've been burned by the negligence and selfishness of the ruling class and attempt their revenge. However, while we might understand their motivations for revenge, we aren't supposed to fully sympathize with them. I mean, these people quickly develop a bloodlust and continue to do illegal shit beyond the initial transgressions of the rich. Instead, it's Batman who gets to enact justice and retribution against the upper class. Again, Batman is characterized as correct and just no matter what, meaning that only he, and the apparently ineffectual police, has the right and authority to deal with these problems. This isn't to say that it's cool for people to just go ice a rich guy, but when those who are working against these kinds of oppressors are always shown as taking it too far, it implies only those with the proper authority should be able to enact justice. Look at this crazy guy with a rifle threatening a worker of Daggett because he's lost his job and just got evicted. We can't have that. All the other people in this neighborhood are helpless or in the background, out of sight, a concept. But Batman, the guy technically outside the law, that's okay. What we get is a show that says the lower class are not equipped to enact justice on the upper class. That's for the law and for Batman. If you know leftist ideology, that's kinda fucked, because the law and cops are partially in place to protect capital and the upper class since they have the power to dictate laws and influence policy to keep the wealth. So when the show symbolically gives sole authority to billionaire Bruce Wayne, it's putting its trust in the ruling class to govern itself. But this is Batman we're talking about. He's one of the good ones. In contrast with his greedy counterparts, Bruce never thinks of himself. He helps at a food bank and goes looking for disappearing homeless. When buying out Competitron, he just wants Gotham to get more jobs. Bruce stops a slash and burn outfit in the rainforest and looks to give to an animal rights charity because he loves nature.
It's important to help others. It may sound corny, but hey, it's how I feel.
He is a perfect cop and a perfect billionaire. I get that Batman and superheroes are supposed to be a power fantasy that we want to emulate or escape to, but this show is telling of what power our culture fantasizes about. Superheroes have to punch someone, right? That's the whole conceit of the genre, alternative cops hitting people the audience generally agrees deserves a good punching. But within self-contained episodic story structures, the genre has a tendency of drawing from a well of pre-established villains. You gotta strike a balance between telling a bunch of unique stories, but with characters we know so you don't need to dedicate time to expositing about them. Mad Hatter gets an origin episode, and you could pepper him into a couple more episodes cause we know his MO. Consequently, villains seldomly change or reform. On a meta level, to have them change goes against the conceit. Someone's gotta get punched. Plus, if they've changed, it's harder to follow on a show that's syndicated largely through reruns, which is designed to be shown out of order. What this leads to is an overall statement that no matter what, a criminal is always a criminal. Batman generally skews towards that reading in a series of episodes which touch on the topic of reform itself. Riddler, in Riddler's Reform, pretends to be stable as a ruse to fool everyone in Gotham and ideally the Batman. That doesn't work out, and when Batman won't tell Riddler how he escaped from a death trap, Riddler loses his shit and obsesses over learning the secret. Dude went overboard real quick, probably quicker than is believable. Killer Croc stumbles upon this band of misfit ex-carnival freaks, and
becomes normal.
Oh, dude, no, he doesn't get normal. He turns on them once Batman shows up and tries to steal the money they survive off of. It ends tragically with Croc explaining why he acted that way.
You said you can be yourself out here, remember? Well, I guess that's what I was doing. Being myself.
He didn't show any signs of wanting to not be himself, but his lamentation concludes the story on a clear if ham-fisted note. Some aspect of the self cannot be changed. Penguin does genuinely seem to do better, but when he realizes the girl he likes is just using him as a party attraction, he immediately falls back into performing an extravagant murder attempt. Pammy here starts up a little nuclear family and tells Batman that
I guess there really does come a time when a woman wants something more in her life. At least this woman does.
psych, she was just growing plant people to play house with and have them steal money and jewelry for her. She cries over pictures of this life she built, but she still kidnapped a man, stole his DNA to create chlorophyll-flavored children and henchmen, so not really reformed as much as more sentimental. Catwoman gets an episode too, but again, she can't stand to change.
I have to be who I am. I realize now I can't change that.
Now, there are two quasi-exceptions to this trend. Two-Face in Second Chance, and Harley Quinn in Harley's Holiday. Two-Face is a unique character because he is in a sense two people, Harvey Dent and Two-Face. This isn't Nolan's version where Dent lives through a tragedy and changes his disposition. Here, Two-Face has Harvey kidnapped for trying to surgically remove Two-Face from his head. In this case, Harvey is willing to change, but another personality physically stops him from doing so. It's the only tragedy of the bunch that actually lands because the darkness in that man does all it can to extinguish the good. Harley's episode, one of the highlights of the series, has her being let out of Arkham for finishing her treatment and being considered mentally sane and sound. She goes out shopping with her two hyenas, where she has a visceral reaction to the guard trying to take the security tag off the dress she bought.
Miss?
I tried to play by the rules, but no, they wouldn't let me go straight. Society is to blame.
It's a misunderstanding that leads to the citywide chase involving a whole-ass tank, but all Harley wants is to be left alone.
You're so close to winning back your real life. Why risk it now?
I'm having a bad day. I'm sick of people trying to shoot me, run me over, and blow me up. I tried to be good. I really did. But if that's not good enough, fine!
Granted, she kept her Harlequin costume and a spare Joker grenade, but at least from her perspective, she made an effort to not be a total criminal, and Batman sympathizes with her.
There's one thing I gotta know. That you stay with me all day, risking your butt for someone who's never given you anything but trouble.
I know what it's like to try and rebuild a life. I had a bad day too, once.
On the whole though, Batman sends mixed signals when it comes to these criminals being released back into the world. The Riddler, Poison Ivy, Penguin, Catwoman, he is all over them, convinced they're gonna slip at any moment. Even Harley, when she's first released, he gives her an intimidating vice script to scare her into being good. He's very skeptical, and is more often than not proven right. Again, the show is written to prove him right, so his spying and illegal behavior is justified.
What a pleasant surprise. Though I should warn you, breaking and entering is against the law.
Like I said, the lack of development or reform in these characters makes sense. The medium makes the message. But what we get is another piece of superhero fiction that almost completely denies people the ability to do better. Some people are innately criminals, but even for those who aren't, the taint of villainy is a difficult thing to shake. I just feel like I had to share a few quick thoughts on this one because it sort of says some things it probably didn't mean to. Jervis Tetch, Mad Hatter, incel, mind control microchip designer. He wants to get with Alice, but she's dating this Chad Billy. What's interesting is that he doesn't immediately use the mind control on Alice.
It would be so easy to make her forget her boorish beau and love me. That would reduce her to a soulless shell.
This specific phrasing, soulless shell, is a crucial bit of text. It isn't that using the microchip on her would be grossly overriding her autonomy, but that his chip has the side effect of making the controlled sort of vacuous, without any volition besides what Jervis commands. And he does eventually use it on her when Batman enters the picture, though he expresses it isn't ideal. Until she loses the chip, Alice just stands around blank-faced and dragged around. She isn't a person anymore, and that's what the episode focuses on. Even Batman echoes what Jervis had said.
I'll cut that cowl off your neck before you'll take her. I've waited my whole lonely life for her.
Then all you've waited for is a puppet, a soulless little doll.
Implicitly, Alice's autonomy is not where the conflict lies, but in her animation. Were she to act normally but be suggestible to falling for Jervis, would it be a problem? I'm sure the creators would think so, but the language here is both specific and broad enough to support this more dramatic interpretation. There's also the ending to this episode. I'll just play it out.
Would not, could not, would not, could not, oh, could not join the dance.
Many episodes have a sad and sympathetic end to them. It's a trope of the show, really. Here, Bruce Timm explains himself. That's kind of a good template on how to treat these characters. Even silly characters like the Mad Hatter. If you add some pathos and some genuine human emotion to that character, then suddenly they'll be quite a bit more interesting than they were previously. Sometimes this feels forced or unearned, but with this episode it's unwanted and unwarranted. Understanding the core sadness of this behavior is a way of preventing it in the future, but this barely drawn out character with a rat face and a killing instinct isn't a tragic figure. The Mad Hatter is a cartoon of a stalker. Yet the focus is on his sadness, in lieu of the transgressed woman who is stripped of her bodily control. I know people are understandably averse to big takedown videos like this, seeing raw negativity as arrogant or ignorant or exploitative of the social economy that is helplessly drawn to hatred. I also know there are people who will get teeth-grindingly frustrated that the latter half of this video features me on some SJW bullshit, which feeds me. Stay mad. But to those against negative criticism, I hope what I've done here wasn't too distasteful. To reiterate, I don't hate Batman the Animated Series. Do I think I could have spent my time doing something better? Oh, most definitely. It's just, when most of what I had seen from the discourse online about this show is this vague but glowing praise, or videos covering the same fucking talking points every time without fail, a misplaced sense of putting the show in its place fell upon me. So that's what this whole exercise was, or at least a toned down version of that. So thanks y'all for waiting another year to hear me talk for a while. See you in 2021 if the country hasn't completely turned to salt. Take care of yourself.
You see this guy? Yeah, he thinks he can make this video and take people's money. No, that isn't how it works, alright? Alright, I'm here to give the money back. Here's his wallet. Ooh, taking the money back, alright? Here are the names of the people who need to get their money back, alright? I know who you are. Alright, Gio said he's online. Lamhoot. JC, alright? Come get your money, alright? I'm helping you out. This is a favor from the Orange Bandit. Piece of shit.